Well, listen, we're going to begin the event today because we want to make sure that we're respectful of everyone's time. I want to welcome everybody to our LIAFPN meeting. LIAFPN, LIAFPN, Long Island Accounting and Financial Planning Network. It's not exclusive to Long Island, especially since Zoom. We have members from all over the country, and we encourage you to be a member. Membership is only $250 per year. LIAFPN.org. We are comprised of financial professionals, each with specialties, particularly on the board in their particular areas of insurance, legal, accounting, forensic accounting, mortgages, payroll, and hold these meetings every other week. We have planned our first live networking event, July 15th. We're either going to hold it at Jewel or at Miller Ridge Inn, and that will be our first cocktail event, getting together again, which we're exciting about. We're going to continue Zoom throughout the summer, and hopefully in the fall, we should start doing our breakfast meetings again, or maybe do a combination. We are a fluid organization, and we'll adjust as necessary and needed.
Hey,
And we are
Neil,
very, very, yes, I'm sorry.
Jewel is not open. They were sold, and I think they're reopening up as an Asian fusion place, and it's not open at the present time, I believe.
Okay. So we'll confirm the location, but we're definitely going to do more of an open air cocktail, nothing formal, no meeting, just get together and reacquaint ourselves and try and be humans again. For those of us who haven't had too much human contact, it's time. The world is opening up, and we're excited about that. I welcome you all here today, and I'm very honored and pleased, and want to let you know our next meeting in 2 weeks, we're going to have Kim Taylor speak about settlement annuities that are used in the legal world when people have claims, and she works with judges and plaintiffs and attorneys on putting those things together and making those things happen. And she was very helpful in some recent situations that we had, and that will be a great meeting as well. So 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting that Janover had put on. I know Eric here is from Janover, and Elijah and their team, who have been in the cannabis industry for over 9 years. And now that cannabis has become legal in New York, a lot of issues are going to come up and have come up, and Omid and his team and Seth are doing some of the legal issues surrounding cannabis. And today, Omid is going to talk about the 411 on 420. With that, Omid, take it away.
Good morning, all. First of all, let me just say, my partner Seth Weinberg is going to do most of the heavy lifting here, but that's fine. That's fine. As Seth likes to say, I'm around for the good looks. Let me also say thank you to Neil and the rest of the folks here for inviting us. This is a wonderfully exciting time for us, because it's not always that you get to be the lawyer on the front lines as new laws are being passed, and people are really excited about. As soon as it was announced by the governor, and we won't go into why the governor had to make this announcement at the time that he did. As soon as the announcement was made by the governor, our phone has been, ringing, because everybody wants in. Everybody wants, to distribute pot somewhere. Let me just introduce everybody to my partner Seth, and also let me thank the folks who've come on. I've known some of you for decades now, Phil and Bill, and it's so nice to see everybody joining us this morning. So I've known Seth Weinberg since we were teenagers. We were lucky enough to go to high school together. He's one of the savviest business lawyers that I know. He heads our firm's corporate practice. He helps all stages of businesses, from development to financing to reorganization. He's also transactional and corporate counsel, but he also has a tremendous amount of concentration in the food and beverage industries. He helps with regulatory projects. He teaches food and alcohol law at Columbia Law School. And he's also just a ridiculously bright lawyer. So I've got the privilege of working with him. And one of the things that's happened is because of our experience.
Sorry, Omid, you froze. I missed all of that. What were you saying?
we're going to put it up to a partnership vote to get you a new computer. And Wi-Fi, by the way. Tell Matthew stop using the Wi-Fi.
I saw that this is being recorded. I'd just like to say now I'd like a copy of it. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
No worries.
Well, one of the interesting things that's occurred is Seth's and actually the firm's background in assisting with cannabis-related projects, right? Somebody who's investing in cannabis in another state, or somebody, and the firm's experience in alcohol and the regulatory business in alcohol throughout the 50 states just naturally led to us being recommended by the same sources and different sources to the same people again and again for the incoming cannabis issues. As Seth will tell you, it's also cannabis is coming in under the auspices of the state liquor authority. And so, it helps to have somebody who has a relationship with those folks, who knows what's going on, who can negotiate those waters. So with that introduction, it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Seth Weinberg, and looking forward to answering any questions you or your clients may have about these issues.
I'm going to attempt to screen share here to see if I can get this right this time.
I thought you were going to pretend to freeze your screen again and give me a bit of a heart attack. So
There you go. It's okay.
All right, did that work?
Works great.
Great. Okay, let's see if we can make this work then. Very nice to meet you all today. I am one of Omid's partners at Weinberg, Zareh, Malkin, Price, traveling back and forth between Long Island and New York City as things demand. As Omid mentioned, though, we work with clients in the alcohol and growing more and more in the cannabis space, wherever they may be, so to speak. That being said, cannabis law, much like alcohol law, is very, very, very specifically relegated to the states right now. The reasons for that are somewhat different between the two. Alcohol law has always been the jurisdiction of the states since the 21st Amendment was passed and specifically abrogated federal supremacy. It's sort of the cornerstone of what I do and what I teach these days. So it's a little strange occasionally. I do think of myself as a constitutional lawyer in that sense. But more to the point, when it comes to the states now, the phrase legalization always bothers me a little bit because we're talking about legalization only at the state level. At the federal level, this is still a Schedule I narcotic. It is still not permitted. You are not supposed to have, possess, transport, etc. But within the states right now are being given a significant amount of leeway thanks to a federal memo that basically says if a state has it as legal, we will not prosecute it at the federal level. Now, as you might expect, this was done during the Obama administration. The last administration had a little, was somewhat distracted for several years in terms of making marijuana policy and cannabis policy. And for those people who are interested in the industry, there is a lot of speculation that that was a very, very good thing. One, there tends to be a heavier leaning towards legalization, particularly for recreational use in blue states that lean Democratic. The second is that the original Attorney General pick, Jeff Sessions, was largely regarded and rumored to be firmly against the spread of the cannabis trade and likely would have revoked the Cole memo, which is the non-prosecution memo at the federal level at some point during his tenure. Obviously, with the somewhat of a revolving door that office became, there was less of a concern with that. But as we always try to remind our clients, you are one bad attorney general pick, so to speak, away from having this business wiped out of existence. And there are people who argue that's never going to happen. As lawyers, we try to never say never. You can try to predict the political winds, but there's an element of that to this, and it just needs to be acknowledged. So with that being said, what we're going to focus on today is New York state law. And we're going to focus on it not from the sense of just the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, but what everybody really wants for Christmas, so to speak, which was the regulations that are supposed to be promulgated under it, which have not yet been released because they're still being drafted. And this may take a significant amount of time. The question keeps being asked, when will we get them? And the answer, probably to some degree, goes back to Omid's earlier quip about the governor and the mounting pressure that may exist on him at any given point to have some sort of significant action that distracts from other activities. Now, that being said, the question comes into play as to why are we talking about this when we don't have the regulations yet? Well, if you look at the MRTA and you go through it, you'll notice that there's a lot of phrases and a lot of similarities to the beverage alcohol control laws of New York State. And it's important to compare the two because, one, you'll get a sense that a lot of the language is being replicated here. There's an old joke that says the favorite instrument in Albany is the photocopier, and for good reason. Historically, when the State Liquor Authority promulgates a new form, they start with the old form. And that's why some of those forms are more onerous, let's say, than they need to be. And they ask for things that you look at and you say, I don't understand why they need it. And the answer is because they've always said that. So the expectation here is that if you have one set of rules, there's a transitive effect that they will likely adopt into the new set of rules. The second thing to recognize is that under the MRTA, the OCM, the Office of Cannabis Management, is largely going to be run out of the State Liquor Authority. It'll be an independent office, but at the same time, it's going to be part of that organization. And if there are significant parts of the regulations that vary, while the statutes remain the same, it would be tantamount to a rejection of some of the logic and the implementation that they've carried on for the last 80 years under the auspices of the SLA. So we don't expect there to be a lot of changes there. So what we are going to do here today is engage in a little bit of freewheeling speculation, largely for the purposes of, one, giving you some insight into what the alcohol laws look like in New York, and two, hopefully allowing you to counsel clients in the sense that while they may not have the regulations, they can at least plan for what we expect to see, and hopefully they can be a little bit further ahead of the pack when it comes to having a cannabis-based business authorized in the state of New York. Given that there will not be an unlimited concentration of these businesses, we expect that if you are able to get your business plan out first and you're able to seek local approval first, you will also be able to be first into the state authority, and that will give you a greater chance, of course, of being approved. So let's talk a little bit about the MRTA and exactly what it did. The MRTA expanded existing medical cannabis and cannabinoid hemp programs, which we discussed earlier. We're getting onto the call, and creates a framework for the production, distribution, and retail sale of cannabis. Okay, and it gives a new adult use cannabis program. It's a nice way of saying recreational. So effectively, though, that phrase production, distribution, and retail is the three tiers of the alcohol system right there. And that's where we see our first similarity that we want to make sure we pay attention to. So what is the Office of Cannabis Management? The Office of Cannabis Management is going to have three publicly stated goals. Social justice. So the idea is that it establishes social and economic equality programs that are supposed to aid members of the community who have been disproportionately impacted by the policies of prohibition of marijuana, and giving them a space to participate in this new industry. Now, this is different than the SLA and what the alcohol industry has always had. So this is something that's going to come up in our discussion today a few times as a key difference that clients should be aware of and be prepared for. Public health and safety, obviously, they want to make sure that there is a quality assurance and regulatory structure that will encompass both production and manufacturing and allow for testing, labeling, packaging, and advertising to make sure that consumers know what they're getting, that they're safe, and they're not targeted to youth. Again, all ideas we've seen before. The trick here, however, is because this is not something that is permitted at the federal level, is there is no FDA review of any of the foods. Now, FDA does not mandate food review. They do mandate certain types of alcohol review. So when you have certain types of spirits, unless they fit into narrowly defined categories, the TTB, which is the division of the federal government that handles alcohol and tobacco regulation, formerly as part of the ATF, takes a look and actually approves labeling and formulation, unless, again, you fit into a very specific set of rules, in which case everybody knows what product you're carrying. Vodka is vodka, gin is gin, tequila is tequila, but mixed products, packaged products, the alcohol equivalent of gummies with cannabis in them, those are all very heavily regulated by TTB. We don't have that at the federal level here, so the state has to take responsibility for it. And then finally, the Office of Cannabis Management, not surprisingly, is supposed to promote economic development within this industry. It's supposed to promote business for for farmers, and to give them the chance to participate in a way that helps them where their previous businesses may have been suffering, and to give them some opportunity with regard to licenses, and provide various types of licenses to other groups, again, going back to social justice, who may have been prohibited, who may have been impacted by law enforcement of this industry previously. One of the reasons for this, obviously, is always in the state of New York. It's easier to pass things saying we're trying to help the farmers than it is anything else. So let's talk about the Office of Cannabis Management for a moment, which is going to be operated by the OCM board. Okay, so what is the board going to do? Well, we don't know everything they're going to do, but we do know what the MRTA provides. And the MRTA provides that it is designed to prevent the distribution of recreational cannabis related products to people under 21. So that includes modification of tobacco vaping products for use with cannabis. It is to prevent revenue from the sale of cannabis from going to criminal enterprises. So you're going to expect to have background checks and prohibitions on certain types of people from entering the industry. You're going to have the effort of, and this is as we discussed as we were coming in today, the diversion and transfer of cannabis products between states. So in other words, as long as cannabis remains federally prohibited, which it does right now, every state that has legal cannabis has a variation on this act that you may only get product from within your own state. Keep in mind, as a warning to clients, this may severely constrain supply, and you may not be able to supply everything you would like to. For those of you who are dealing with producers, there may end up being significant licensing deals with brand names across state lines, however, in order to promote certain brands before they can actually be transferred. There's supposed to be any sort of prohibition on activities that remain illegal. There is not to be any expansion beyond cannabis into other illegal drugs. There is supposed to be a public safety element to what they do. They are supposed to inform the public of the dangers of cannabis use, particularly driving while impaired. They are to prevent the growth of cannabis on public lands, not surprisingly, to inform the public about the rules on federal property and what may happen there. Think airports, air transportation, and stories about people putting things in their water bottles as they head to the airport. Don't do that, certainly. And then establish application licensing and the permitting process to ensure that all owners are disclosed, and that officials or other individuals with control over the approval of the application, permit, or license do not themselves have any interest in an application, license, or permit. Here again, we see another concept that's being brought in from the alcohol industry, the idea of full disclosure. One of the often mistaken elements in the alcohol business, particularly as it comes to restaurants and bars in New York, is that you can have what's called a silent partner. Somebody who invests in the business, who owns a piece of it, but is never put, quote unquote, on the license. That's not supposed to happen. The state takes that fairly seriously. It's called availment. They had a meeting about it yesterday, and they're focusing on third-party providers who are taking a piece of the business now in the alcohol industry. That same issue is going to rear its head here, except they're going to go under a greater level of scrutiny, as the theory, as you get into cannabis. As a result, be prepared to make sure that anybody who is connected with this business is prepared to go on the license, whether they are an officer, director, or owner. And an owner should include anybody who has equity, an instrument that is convertible into equity, warrants, options, etc., or convertible notes, or is financing the business. So if you plan on lending money into a business that involves cannabis in the state of New York and not going on the license, we would not count on that. You should expect that you will be fully disclosed and your personal information will have to be supplied to the OCM in order to be approved. There was expansion of medical use, greater level of conditions for access to the marijuana. There was a greater number of caregivers that could actually authorize it. And there is some permit for home cultivation of medical cannabis for authorized patients. And there's a split system for this. And this is, again, very important because it's going to tie back to the way alcohol is run. For those of you who are familiar with alcohol anywhere in the United States, we have what is referred to as the three-tier system. Okay, so you have, as we talked about before, production, you have distribution, and you have retail. All right, and the theory is that those three are supposed to be kept separated. Now, in the cannabis industry, they're focusing in New York on a two-tiered structure. Okay, and the reason for that is cannabis is, quite frankly, easier to distribute than alcohol is. It weighs less, it's smaller, it's more readily transportable, but also because there is no existing middleman for distribution of it. There is a distribution license, but it is not mandatory that you buy from a distributor. Production will encompass giving distribution capability, but only of your own grown products. So in other words, producers can distribute to retailers, but distributors can effectively act, for lack of a better phrase, as mixing centers. So if you have producers A, B, and C, a distributor can buy from producer A, producer B, and producer C, and then resell to a retailer any or all of those products. Whereas the producer, if they're selling direct to retail, may only sell A can sell A, B can sell B, and C can sell C. So there may be some value added in the distribution arm. Obviously, in the world of alcohol, there have been decades of promotion of the value of distributors within the state. Those values may be debated on and off by participants of the industry. But in this case, this would be a new insertion, really functioning as a transport system to allow a transport and mixing system to allow cannabis products to reach retailers. Now, the reason the split system is important is because you cannot cross the tiers. So in other words, if you are involved in the production, you cannot be involved in retail sale, in independent retail sale. Production carries some limited level of retail capability. After all, we're talking about a farm product here in the state of New York. So they want to give farmers the ability to sell their own products. But retail in and of itself, which is where most clients are going to come in from, are going to be operations that are local. We expect that they will follow the same rules as the alcohol rules do based on what is in the statute already. And it's important to note what some of these highlights are, although there are some differences. So when advising retail clients, select your location, your management, and your operations carefully, because those are the three key things that we expect the state will look at. Those are the three key elements in an alcohol license, and the same activities are being regulated under the MRTA. There's an extensive criteria for the board to use for approval, but the OCM will be issuing more specific guidance as they develop their own rules. The statute mandates the following factors, though. There has to be some element of social equity considered. There has to be a history of employment violations and the use of a labor peace agreement. There has to be consideration of environmental concerns. So is there going to be traffic and noise within the community? And will there be proximity and character to other local licenses? Okay, we have the latter rules in alcohol licensing. The social equity and the history of employment violations, the labor peace agreement, those are all new. So those are things that are going to have to be considered here, whether or not you may have been exposed to them previously. There's a limit of 3 retail licenses for any person. That does not mean that you can have 3 separate LLCs, each of which in turn has 3 licenses. If your name appears on more than 3 licenses, and again, keep in mind that any way you're connected with a business, you should expect that it will appear, you're done. That's it. You've hit your maximum. You want to get a 4th one, you sell one of the existing 3. You should expect that if you're picking a location, it cannot be within 500 feet of a school, nor 200 feet of a house of worship. Retail licenses will include delivery privileges, though. So keep in mind that if you can, pick a place from which you expect that you will be able to send out delivery people, there's a significant advantage to that. It may not have to be the best location, so long as it is an accessible location. And they're also going to adopt a 30-day notification to community boards and municipalities for review. The same requirement exists in alcohol filings right now. Before you file for a retail alcohol license, you have to give 30 days notice to the local community so they can come in and comment. This is where you get the stereotype of the retirees in the area coming in and complaining about everything that makes noise. You should expect that you're going to have significant community involvement, and the smart clients are going to go out and they are going to canvass the community. They're going to work with the community. They're going to look to have petitions written in their favor. They're going to look to make sure that their neighbors are aware of what they're doing and will be supportive of it.
That one time, I complained one time, and now you're saying I'm a senior citizen. Thanks a lot.
No problem. In terms of taxation, there is going to be a cannabis tax structure, obviously. As we come out of the pandemic, revenues from this are, of course, going to be a major factor in why this is going to move forward. This is going to have an excise tax of 9% at retail. There's a local excise tax of 4% of the retail price to encourage communities to accept retailers, and counties will get 25% of the revenue, 75% going to the municipality on that.
Seth, can I, forgive me, let me just jump in for a second.
Sure.
The questions come up now a couple of times about how many licenses can someone have? Can I have my wife have a license and me have a license and my 10-year-old have another license? What are your thoughts about that? I think it's going to mimic the alcohol world, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
I think that's all very much expected. So first of all, the 10-year-old cannot have a license. 21 and up. Okay. That being, that's the rule for alcohol. We expect that rule will carry through as well here. Ironically, when it comes to alcohol, federal government does not have a 21-year age restriction, which a lot of people miss. It's actually the states that have the 21-year restriction. Now, that's been pushed on them by the federal government for other reasons, through use of state highway tax dollars, et cetera. But it's actually the state's prohibition that makes it 21 and up. Different states have different interpretations with regard to what happens when you have a husband and wife or a family unit that has multiple licenses. Keep in mind, some states allow multiple licenses. New Jersey, by way of example, is what we refer to as a chain state. The AMP, the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, and Best Bottle, as they're known now, has, I believe, 124 licenses in the state. New York, on the other hand, when it comes to alcohol, allows you exactly 1 license for a liquor store. However, you may find somebody from time to time who says, I have 5. Well, how do they have 5 liquor stores? Typically, they have 1, their brother has 1, their mother has 1, their father has 1, their aunt has 1, okay, which is what you're alluding to. We expect that this will have at least some reasonable level of enforcement here. If you are going to be trying to run an economy of scale, that's going to be more difficult, obviously. The state is allowing, by the statute, 3 retail licenses per person. So you do get some capability to have multiple licenses. The challenge in having your family members have multiple licenses is what happens if you have a falling out? What happens if you have a change in family structure, i.e. a divorce or a death? All right. And how do things pass from one family member to another? Okay. So you may end up in a more complicated situation than you expect to. And that can be very, very challenging. There have been cases in the state of New York where children, for way of example, who have felony convictions and therefore cannot be on an alcohol license, have tried to inherit businesses from their parents, and the state has simply said no. We're not going to allow it. You are a disqualified person, and the mere fact that this is a family business does not exempt that.
And forgive me for interrupting. What are your thoughts about other businesses that so for example, I have a bookkeeping business or an accounting business, and I also have a cannabis business. Would it work the other way? Would the flip side of the coin also work, where the other businesses would be affected?
So the answer is probably not. You can have multiple businesses. That's not a problem. The challenge, however, the one thing you should always be aware of, and I think most of the people here, the professionals on this call, would agree that, of course we need to do this. Clients don't always recognize this, though, is you need to have a separate company for each entity. Okay, this is particularly important when you're dealing in a regulated industry. We tell our alcohol clients all the time, do not combine this with any other business. We understand you don't like paying the fees. We understand it's unpleasant, but if you're not going to take it seriously enough to start a new company, this is not the business for you. And in the event that you are being audited, your excise tax records are being reviewed, or anything else that's going to happen here, you need to understand that everything in the business is subject to regulation. It actually brings up an interesting point, and it's one that came up yesterday with regard to the third-party provider regulations that are being looked at by the SLA. One of the great mistakes people make about the State Liquor Authority in New York is that they believe it only affects the sale and transportation of alcohol. That's incorrect. The SLA has governance capability over all businesses that transact any sort of business with alcohol. So what that means is, yes, they can set rules on when and how you sell alcohol. But if you are a restaurant or a bar or a distributor or you run a distillery, the State Liquor Authority can impose regulation on any aspect of that business that they choose. Okay, even if it is not specific to the sale of alcohol. So the fact that you need to maintain a food menu, for example, the fact that there are limits on when you are open or closed, on how much noise you can produce, are all effects of the fact that they have very broad capability to regulate any business that transacts any part of its operations in alcohol and is therefore licensed by the state. So, there were several people who submitted, several very good law firms, quite frankly, who submitted papers prior to yesterday's meeting that said, you can't tell us what we can do with our food service. And the answer to that, I will bet dollars to donuts, is going to come back as, oh, hell yes, we can. All right. And the same should be taken here in cannabis. Okay. If the OCM is going to be able to tell you a lot of what you can do, and we can see that in the laws already as it's being developed, that, there's nothing with regard to the simple transaction for a purchase and sale of some amount of cannabis that has anything to do with social equity or labor peace agreements. But those have been mandated, and those are going to be governed by the OCM based on that same theory of law.
Seth, quick question.
Yes.
Regarding banking, in the state of New York particularly, we know this has been an issue throughout the country since it's still a Fed crime. Are they allowing banking of cannabis producers, suppliers, distributors of any kind today in the state of New York?
So the challenge becomes, and it remains, how do you handle banking, payment processing, insurance, and other ancillary structures and features that you really have to have in order to run a successful business? Right. And the answer is that the businesses are free to determine what they are willing to do. But the challenge is that, you are still aiding and abetting a federal crime at the end of the day. Lawyers have to be careful about how they advise these businesses, as do accountants, obviously. There's a very fine line between what you do and don't. One of the, things we'll get to towards the end is there's a phrase I know a couple of lawyers in this area happen to use, which I really don't favor, which is the phrase, quote unquote, going legal. The answer is it's not going legal. You're either operating within the law or you're not. And if you're advising clients who are not, quote unquote, going legal, you're advising a criminal enterprise. So you have to give some serious consideration to how you're going to do this. Omid, I think you're aware of the ethics concerns when it comes to the bar on this. But
It's all right. I'll defend you when the grievance comes. It's fine.
thank you very much. And on behalf of our malpractice provider, thank you. But the answer is that while banks have the capability to, in theory, state banks in particular have the capability to handle this, my understanding and my experience is federally chartered banks won't touch the stuff. And state banks are resistant to it.
And I know in other parts of the country, the credit unions, they've set up separate credit unions to handle it. And that from an accounting perspective, I know Jan over our last meeting had mentioned that they have set up certain banking things. And the relevance of the whole thing is everything's interrelated. So from an insurance standpoint, insurance carriers are very reluctant to do anything with any business that you can't prove. We're talking life insurance and disability now, where you can't prove banking and accounting and payroll and all those good things. So I only mention this to caution any clients that come into any CPAs or anything else that this is a very tricky area and has to be dealt with, as you said, very, very cautiously, and you need to reach out to the experts, legal and accounting, that are in this field to do it right, or there could be big problems down the road.
Neil, I will also tell you this. So, for example, we give advice to cannabis companies or companies related to cannabis companies, right? An investor of, before we went down the path, we made sure that, for example, our malpractice carrier, was on board and would cover us. Not that we are ever going to commit malpractice, but that we, theoretically we're covered, because some won't. Some companies definitely do not. Especially the older, stodgier companies will not cover you until you're in a place where you can. And we found out that our malpractice carrier actually has a special unit set up for this kind of thing.
And there are in the property casualty side, and there are life insurance companies now that will offer coverage for cannabis areas. But again,
right. So for example,
specifically the banking is the hub that controls the insurance and everything else. So, and the accounting. So we're all interrelated in the fact that the legal, the accounting, and the insurance, everything's got to come in line, or everything can blow up.
Yep, and all of these things are going to come into play, and clients should be advised of all of them. Obviously, that you can't assume your existing business relationships are going to back your play into this field.
Right.
I will also just say this. One of the people is asking, sort of, well, what if I'm a service provider to multiple different, cannabis companies, and I don't think it should be any different than any other service provider. However, the cannabis issue, if, like Seth said, let's say you get a different attorney general in office, everything could go, right? It's all vulnerable because the states and the feds don't agree on these things.
Up until a few years ago, Federal Express would carry alcohol packages without a second thought. And it wasn't until they had a problem in Massachusetts that they turned around and said, we're out of this business now. We're just done. So, I would caution people, if you are dependent on any one service provider, you be aware of what your backups are. You be aware of the risks involved of losing them. This extends, back to the slide for a moment, to where you're going to pick a location. Keep in mind that, you have cities and towns have the right to opt out effectively of permitting retail establishments in their jurisdictions through the end of the year. And if you don't have confidence that your jurisdiction is going to allow this, you probably don't want to go signing a lease. You should also be aware that in the SLA world, for alcohol businesses, restaurants, bars, hotels, liquor stores, etc., landlords have to sign off on the fact that you're going to run an alcohol business out of their space. And if they don't sign off, you don't get the license. You're dead in the water, so to speak. And there's a significant amount of information about the landlord that has to be provided. Keep in mind, when we talked about third-party providers, very important to note, that includes any landlord who has the cute little phrase of, well, here's the amount you pay me per month, and I get 10% of your revenue. Okay, that, particularly under recent rulings from the SLA, which we fully expect will carry over to cannabis, you're going to be on the license if you're a landlord under those circumstances. So if you represent real estate companies or landlords, and you're looking at leasing to any cannabis company, and quite frankly at this point any company that has an alcohol license, be aware of those regulations. One thing to note, while you can opt out, while you can have villages and localities opt out of hosting retail, they can't opt out of adult use legalization. Okay, which means that you can still smoke it, eat it, consume it, whatever you're going to do. All right, so I know we're running a little short on time, so let's go through this list a little bit quickly here. To recap what we can predict from OCM based on the alcohol industry. The MRTA is the 10 Commandments. OCM is right in the Bible. Okay, when that gets written at that point, you're going to have an explanation of how they're going to implement all of this, all right, in the form of the regulations. Separate licenses are going to be required for each premises used in the operation. Ownership changes will be regulated by the board. Do not expect that you can suddenly turn around and start reselling pieces of it. You'll have to be approved in advance is our expectation. Anything that you would have had to put in the initial application, if you make a change to it, you're going to have to file. The tied house laws, which separate producers from retailers, we expect that's going to continue because the MRTA provides for it, and we know that OCM, being run out of SLA, will certainly enforce it. Trade practice rules should be expected to apply. In other words, retailers and suppliers who are unrelated cannot engage in specific types of transactions where one has offered gifts or incentives to the other that they're not offering to everyone. There will be different licenses for retail dispensaries versus on-site consumptions. It's the same way New York establishes its alcohol now. If you want to have a marijuana lounge, that is very different from a retail dispensary where you buy it and leave the premises. We expect there will be limitations on other activities in the same establishment. Okay, if you are going to sell marijuana, we expect that you are just going to be selling marijuana and cannabis and things immediately related to the consumption of it. Okay, we do not expect, for example, that you can sell cannabis and Doritos. All right, people are going to have to go somewhere else to get their snacks. And the reason for that is because if you are, and this is something we've advised our clients, if you are thinking that the corner CBD store is going to be your local dispensary and that's the one that you're worried about competition from, you're looking in the wrong direction. Okay, because the one you should be worried about is, for example, Whole Foods. Okay, deciding that they're going to sell cannabis out of their stores. We don't think that's going to be permitted under the state laws and the regulations that are coming, but you have to be aware of the possibilities. Availment issues, make sure that your applications are complete and accurate and that clients are disclosing all relevant information. Omissions on these things are serious. They are perjury, and the state will run background checks. They are not shy about that sort of thing. And the OCM is not going to seek discretionary authority where it's not explicitly granted. The rule at the SLA, generally speaking, is that they enforce the law as it's written, and they do not have to apologize for it. We expect that we will see the same thing from in the MRTA. You want to be aware of the social equity programs going forward, making sure that you are aware of what your obligations here are going to be, that there have to be a certain number of licenses that are going to go to minority or women-owned business enterprises, distressed farmers, or service-disabled veterans. Understand what is involved in that. It's not just merely token ownership, but you have to actually have the capability for the specified members to make decisions. They cannot outsource it all to somebody who does not fit that quality and qualification. The board is going to look at how diverse your workforce is and whether or not you're following the social responsibility provisions at the time of renewal. Nobody wants to be the first one who's going to be denied renewal based on that. And while the penalty framework is being restructured to avoid criminalization, be aware that if you have a history of felony convictions or serious misdemeanors, you will likely be prohibited from holding a license. As we talked about before, if you're advising people to not get licensed, that is a very dangerous area to play in. So we don't recommend that, particularly because it can result in a permanent ban from the industry. And just some best practices as we close out here for lawyers and clients. Know the risks and obstacles based on federal laws we discussed. Be prepared to disclose all information. Don't try to be cute and hide things. Lay the groundwork early in the community. Understand the products. It doesn't just start and end with the license. Clients have to understand quality control, risks of misrepresentation. Every state has a version of the federal laws on misrepresentation. We expect that, state tort claims will be brought. If I can give one piece of advice with regard to client management, don't confuse enthusiasm for expertise. People who come in with $1 and a dream are often easily distracted, and when they hit something that they don't like in this process, they may turn around and simply quit. You want them to take this seriously as a business, because that's what, as professional advisors, that's what we should be doing. Clients should be prepared to be flexible. They may not get the business plan they want. It's our job to steer them towards what is possible. They should expect us to have substantial financing involved. We should manage the expectations. This is going to be a long process, especially for the early adapters. There's no question that this is going to take a significant review, and you're entering into a new area, although we do think we have some good guidance on what's existing already. And then there are going to be changes as time goes on. Be prepared for them so that you're ready and you can redirect your clients when you need to. And I think, Omid, that brings us to where, we're probably a few minutes over, so we're going to stop there, I think.
Thank you. No, this is very informative and very much appreciative. We will be sending a follow-up thank you email with this recording, and we will also have all your information on it so that they want to contact you and Omid with a client or further discussion that they can. And again, we very much appreciate your contribution. I did want to remind everybody that we do have a meeting in 2 weeks. If you want to stay around, we can do a little networking, at least people identify who they are and what they are. For those that want to stay around past 9, it's a small group, and maybe we can just say who we are and what we do. And thanks again. And we'll just go around the room real quick. Omid, we've already introduced you. Larry Bloom, if you just want to say a couple words.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Larry Bloom with Bloom Schoen CPAs. I'm also on the board of the LIAFPN, and I want to thank Omid and Seth for presenting today, and look forward to the presentation in 2 weeks and our continued growth as an organization and return to some live events.
There you go. Phil.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Phil Kaniak, forensic accountant, business appraiser. I do damage calculations and business valuations. And I'm also a member of the board here.
Phil, forgive me for interrupting. Phil is also an expert. He's also a consultant on 2 different matters I have right now. I can't recommend him enough.
Thank you for the plug, Omid.
Excellent. Larry Shearer.
Okay, I'm also going to plug Philip. Phil, you're the guy when it comes to any of my valuations and for business. So he's done a great job. Shearer & Associates, Larry Shearer. I am a trust and estate and business succession attorney, and we include both elder law and estate planning in our, let's call it wheelhouse. Thank you.
If I can jump in for 1 second here, I noticed as I was coming out, and I apologize, I haven't been able to see the chat. Lawrence asked a question, what happens if you co-locate the business with something else? Based on the history with the SLA, we would say that the business has to operate a space that no other business is operative in, and that you don't have to pass through another business in order to get to it. So it has to have some form of access to either a public corridor or quasi-public corridor, or else directly to the street. And it has to have a unit number on it that is separate and apart from any other business. So in other words, if you have a convenience store and you want to sell cannabis products, they should be separate with distinct entrances, but they can be side by side, but they shouldn't be a blended unit. Okay. This is something that Whole Foods ran into a severe problem with in Columbus Circle about a decade ago.
Seth, I'll be talking to you because I have a client that has that little problem.
Happy to discuss.
Bill Greenbaum.
Hi, everyone. I'm an independent insurance broker in New York City. I'm licensed in New York and New Jersey. I help people decide if insurance can help them find solutions to protect their family, their income, or get health care that they need so they can go on with the business of living.
Terrific. Thank
Great
you.
to be here.
Thank you.
Appreciate this.
Teresa.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sorry. I'm Teresa Garzone. I do payroll and HR. I help streamline your processes for time and attendance, HR, 401k, insurance. We integrate with the brokers. So if you ever need payroll or HR, let me know. Thank you. I'm also on the board.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm the
Anita.
treasurer. Thank you.
Anita from Florida.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Anita, and I'm technically a student in accounting, and I'm looking to become a bookkeeper for cannabis and musicians. So I was, wondering about the whole working for multiple cannabis companies.
Gotcha. Excellent. Eric.
Good morning, Eric Freed with Janover, mid-sized accounting firm in Garden City in Manhattan. I work with small and medium-sized businesses and their owners.
Terrific. And for those of you who don't know me, Neil Himmelstein, I'm an independent wholesaler of life, annuities, disability, long-term care, and financial products. And I work with a lot of attorneys and accountants that are here to help them with their clients, and they help me with my clients. And this is how we all get along and play nice in the sandbox. And again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to seeing everybody face to face. And it was great meeting those that haven't been here before. I encourage you to look into joining LIAFPN and participate in future events. And thanks again. I'm going to sign off.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Take
Thank you.
care, all. Be well. Bye-bye.